Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Brad. And you are a friend, and you've been a great advisor. And you're usually right. I'm just glad you were not right about that first thing, the endorsement of it.
He was a good candidate, too.
He was. You said Smith good, Adams better is what I remember was the. But you know, who's keeping track of all that? So, what an awesome time! Thank you all for being here. Thank you again, Brad, for hosting this and for the Confederate Relic Room. The important work that is done here. I'm so grateful for it, and I'm really humbled to be a small part of this. Mostly to tell what I think is a really such an important story. And every time I have the awesome privilege of telling it, I really pray and hope I do some of it justice, because of the work that this crew did is one that no one should ever forget, and it should always be told. And so it's a privilege to be able to share it with you. I'm also very fortunate to be here with my mom and dad, Nina and Jim Smith, and come from family on both sides that every generation have served since the founding of our nation. And I'm just, so it's no mistake. If I've done anything right, it's because of them and everybody around me. Mom, Dad, thanks for being here. But telling this story is an important one, and I will tell you, I have a lot of information to share, and so I'm going to try not to go too fast, but the Laffey is like the Forrest Gump of ships. It was everywhere. It was everywhere that history was made. It was there through World War II, Korea, Vietnam, the Bikini Atoll test. It's a remarkable story. But today, she is at Patriots Point. She is only one of two out of the thousands of ships at D-Day. She's only one of two U.S. warships that still exist today. It was her and the USS Texas that are still, and they actually fought side by side, and you're going to hear some stories about the work that they did together in some remarkable combat experience. But this year we're celebrating 50 years at Patriots Point, 50 years since it was open, with the intent of preserving these important history of these ships. But it's not just about the history. It educates certainly generations that weren't there about what was done for them. Hopefully we all respond in ways that causes or calls us to live lives that reflect what's done for us. But it also helps educate us about what's going to be required for the future, what has been done for us and what will be required. But she sits with the Yorktown at Patriots Point. I do hope, if you have not had a chance to visit her, she'll go to dry dock in January, we hope. She's going to get what they call a shave and a haircut, and then brought back for probably another 10, 15 years, even in better mooring, and we've got big plans for her and for her future. Where I'm pulling some of my stories from, I promise I didn't make any of this stuff up. They come from the first is a book that Julian Beckton, the skipper of the ship, wrote himself. And this book was given to my dad by World War II veterans of the ship. And it lists some of the most awesome people: Tom Fern, Spriggs, Ted Runk, who received the Navy Cross for his service on April 16th. An incredible book. I commend it to you. Another story is the Hell from the Heavens, which is by John Wukovitz. John and I have become good friends. Commend this book to you. Even the audio book is incredible. It tells the perspective really from the sailor's experience, and it's a powerful story of both D-Day and the Pacific Campaign. I pulled all the actual records, the experience that it went through since its commissioning, as well as that's my grandfather, Paul Smith, who was the gunnery officer. And on occasion, I would get him to tell me a few stories. And it was every moment I was very, very grateful and privileged to learn from him and his experience. But the Laffey, she was commissioned in February 4th. I'm going to take you back to February 4th, 1944. At this time, she was built at Bath, Maine. At that time, they were building, every 17 days, a new destroyer was rolling out and set off to sea, every 17 days. They built more ships at Bath Iron Works than the entire nation of Japan throughout the war. They went from about 800 employees to over 12,000 at its peak. And they were turning out some of the best and the newest warships to ever be seen on the seas. And Laffey being a Sumner class, and by the way, she is the last surviving Sumner class on the planet. There was one before that was in service over in Taiwan, but she's the last one. What's interesting at her commissioning, And my grandfather, like all those that were there that day on 8 February 1944, they are plank owners, so they're the first crew for the ship. They have a new skipper, obviously a new ship, new skipper shows up. His name is Julian Beckton. He just got through a massive battle. He was awarded the Silver Star. I think in the end of his service, he had 4 or 5 Silver Stars. But on April 7, 1943, while escorting landing craft near Guadalcanal, the USS Aaron Ward was attacked by Japanese dive bombers. Despite the crew's efforts, the ship suffered multiple bomb hits, leading to her sinking near Trinité Point in the Solomon Islands. 20 men were killed, 59 wounded, and 7 reported missing. So Beckton has just come out of this fight, sees a brand new crew, brand new ship. 80% of his crew has never served on a ship before. This is February of 1944. So getting them ready is paramount and is absolute priority for Beckton. Once they go for what they call a shakedown cruise in the Caribbean. And my grandfather used to always tell me about how much and how often Beckton would train. There was never a moment, if you ever thought for a single moment you were going to get a break, Beckton had you up in the general quarters. He had those crews working those guns so well, they shot better than any other gun crew on any other destroyer in the United States Navy at that time, hands down, in terms of the numbers of rounds they were able to spin out at a period of time. Interesting things about the Sumner class. Before that, the Fletcher and others, there was no interior pathway from the stern to the bow. So crossing the Atlantic, you took your life in your hand going from one end of the ship to the other. So they added this interior passageway, which was very helpful. They added also a sea cabin for the skipper so that he could literally, not have to ever leave the bridge and whenever they were in a combat area and combat zone. But she was the latest thing. Radar-directed guns, the 5-inch, 5.1, 5.2, and 5.3 are the 5-inch mounts. She had 11 20-millimeter tub guns all over, mostly in the rear, and 40-millimeter, which could do 160 rounds per minute. The main batteries could do about 12 to 16 rounds per minute, and the 20-millimeter guns would do about 1,000 rounds per minute. But she was the latest, greatest thing when she was built. Their mission, I'm going to talk to you very quickly about D-Day. Really fascinating mission. Okay, they've just come out of their shakedown cruise in the Caribbean. Now they're headed to the south of England, getting ready for the biggest event in the war, D-Day. Laffey takes a particularly important role leading the convoy to Utah Beach. Their mission was to get every LCI and LCT to Utah Beach by 6:30 and have them all securely hit the beach. The first ramp went down at 6:31, and everyone made it to the beach that day. Couple of the reasons for the difference in the casualty rates between Omaha and Utah was, one, the shape of the beach at Omaha, right? It was concave, and it allowed for very much interlocking sectors of fire, a very punishing, terrible situation to attack. Utah was different, it was convex, so it was harder for them to have those interlocking sectors of fire, but it was also the work of the ships. They took out several gun batteries that helped pave the way for a much safer arrival on shore. Some of the interesting things, once they delivered those ships, Laffey went to work pounding the shores. She was a part of 6 or 8 destroyers right here. After they dropped, they started doing circles back and forth. And they would take turns once they moved to the front as they're making a pass, and they would start delivering rounds from the 5 inches. They would talk to shore fire control parties, which would be the infantry on the ground, calling them and getting fire directed in at particular targets. A couple of interesting times, there was a sniper in a steeple, and one of the things, if you ever see Saving Private Ryan, there's a scene where a sniper's in a steeple. The reality is that every steeples were shot to the ground before a sniper would ever have a chance to get into one. But this time there was one in there, and for one pass, they took the steeple from the top to its foundation as they passed, getting across. But they continued to provide support throughout that day, and they remain on station for the days to come, doing some remarkable work, and I'm going to talk to you about that. Just pictures of the landing. What people don't realize is, and you don't see it a lot, but the Luftwaffe's presence during D-Day, they were there, and attempted numerous times to take the Laffey out. One time a bomb hit just off her stern and just barely missed her. The Nelson, USS Nelson next to her was hit. And on one evening, of course, at the nighttime, you're blackout, so all the lights are off. And they heard an incoming plane and then realized at the last minute that this plane was very low, and it was a German Luftwaffe fighter. And it didn't realize until the last second that there was a ship there. And it wasn't ready to be like a kamikaze in the Japanese air. But as soon as it saw it, it tried to bank right to avoid it. The plane wing tipped the water, rolled in, and he killed himself that night right before hitting the Laffey as she was doing her work. But they were constantly working D-Day plus 1, 2, 3, chasing these little German boats, little speedboats that they had out. They were constantly helping to demine and guide the demining ships and keep the area clean. But every night was an effort to protect the area from German E-boats and U-boats along what they call the Dixie Line. And that was very important for their work to protect the flow of supplies to the beach to continue to support the advancing infantry, which was critical to their work. They continued to have huge impacts on the Germans in supporting our advancing infantry in the Army. Here are several of the reports. They are credited with taking out numerous German pillboxes. I think some of the reporting sounds very classic World War II. You think when you're getting the official reports, it would be something like different than you smashed them or there are dead Germans everywhere. But this is the actual reporting. They were highly effective. There were numerous times where, and I do recall grandfather telling me one story when he was talking to Shore Fire Control Party and sending in rounds and then adjusted fire and then lost them. That they had, based upon what he had heard and then not heard, that they were killed, and then somebody else got on the radio later. Every day was battling mines. This was another U.S. A smaller ship. They had just passed over the area, and the Germans were able to design mines where they would miss a minesweeper, and then they would go off in the next ship that went by. And this was a ship that was right behind them that was taken out. Here's more pictures of the German E-boats and the mining that they would do. What ended up happening, as you know from your history, is the landing initial days were successful, but for the first time in like 4 years, or 4 decades rather, forget 4 years, but the worst weather in 4 decades. June 19th through 22nd, there was no ability to continue to support those that had made the landing. And at that time, they needed to obviously continue to support, and they were trying to get to Cherbourg, which is a large deep water port, because you're not going to be able to survive long if all you're doing is providing these from the Aramonch area, from the little floating barges that they put up. They needed to have a deep water port, and they were really at the risk of losing the invasion. They were about the risk of being another Dunkirk and being pushed back. The U.S. Army's 4th Infantry Division was stuck, and had been stuck for days outside Cherbourg on June 24th, and they were having huge losses, and they were starting to attrit in a position where it was appearing that it was all going to stall. Well, the Laffey, along with 4 other destroyers and the battleship group, included the Texas and the Arkansas, which was known as Bombardment Group 2, undertook a mission that was called the Battle of Cherbourg. It took place on June 25th. Laffey, along with that array, were there to attack Battery Hamburg, which was the largest and most complex and most sophisticated shore gun emplacements that the Germans had, and it was effectively preventing the 4th Infantry Division from gaining and securing Cherbourg. The bombardment began at 12:30. Here's a picture of Cherbourg and its location to give you an idea. German guns at Battery Hamburg focused their guns on the Laffey. Germans had the harbor gridded with planned fire, and the Laffey came under sustained and effective fire. 4 ships around Laffey, a part of the same bombardment group, are all hit during the initial bombardment. The USS Barton's hit just ahead of Laffey. Beckton maneuvered to avoid the next salvos and nearly at the Laffey's bow. The U.S. Texas was hit. They lost about 35 on the bridge. It was a hellish, and there were several moments where, according to the fight and according to the crew, everybody would expect, given the incoming rounds, that the skipper was going to turn away from the shore. And the skipper didn't do that. The skipper turned towards the shore, and then the next rounds from the German batteries came right where they would have been. The other leaders, both the Army leaders and as well as the captain on the skipper of the Texas, really remarked at the courage of the Laffey displayed in putting itself in between those rounds and the Texas and drawing fire and getting well in with range of these guns. When it did so, it took out 2 important gun emplacements, which helped the 4th Infantry Division to be able to move. The Laffey then maneuvered between the German guns and the battleship to screen their departure and allowed the Texas to get free from the battle zone. The damage, both the Texas and the Arkansas departed the kill zone. The Laffey remained there. It fired 816 shells at Battery Hamburg, knocking 2 out of the 4 main guns, helped making incredible gains that day. Here are pictures of some of the guns. Written after that engagement, Captain William Friesman of the Texas, Laffey's courageous actions by pressing the attack, facing overwhelming fire, the damage and purposely maintained very close to the shore. The Army commanders credited the Naval Force bombardment group that broke the back of the German defense at Cherbourg. It was a red-letter day for the Navy. Avenues of supplies established an enduring foothold for the invasion. Fire support by the Navy, accurate, effective, and sustained. 121 shells fired against Battery Hamburg, which was their largest gun. The Laffey was awarded a Gold Star for conspicuous display of courage and intrepidity. The Laffey's work made theirs much easier. So they pull off this position. They're like, they got a circuit that's busted. They see that for some reason they can't seem to. It's the gouging line that helps protect against land mines or sea mines. And they start walking down to check where this break occurred. They went from the stern all the way up to the bow, and they finally got up to the bosun's mate locker and opened the door, and a bunch of water just fell out on top of them. And they realized there's a 4-foot shell sitting in the bosun's mate locker, unexploded, that had come through on the outside of the waterline, but turned out to be a dud. At the time, the Germans had Czech slave labor making munitions, and 1 out of every 20 or 50 they would intentionally make a dud. One of the remarkable things, they talk about this as the ship that would not die, and you'll see why. But there's so many moments where she was not supposed to survive that day. If that shell had exploded, the ship would have been sunk. There was no way else it would have gotten through. But by some, miracle, they survived that day. They lifted that dud, threw it overside, and went back and made repairs, and then prepared for the next battle, moving to the Pacific. Laffey, she, stopped off at Boston, got refitted. They put her in a new paint, the Dazzle paint that you may see in some of those World War II era ships in the Pacific. She had her own Dazzle, and then she made her way out to the Pacific, and she spent 4 or 5 different engagements through the Philippines, from Mindanao, Iwo Jima, certainly Okinawa. She was in the thick of it, as many were, obviously, but always seemed to find her way. And she, before this day of April 16th, she's in a number of battles against kamikazes and a number of shore landings and providing support, screening, always constantly working. And throughout this whole experience, this crew is getting better and better and better. And they are ready for what is going to take place on April 16th. So we're going to jump there. I'm going to play a brief video. And I'm going to talk a little bit about each plane and the response and tell you some of the individual stories. But it's about an 8.5, 9-minute video. They'll give you a little bit of the picture. The full video doesn't even cover all of the planes. And I find myself, it's a long thing, but I can't imagine 80 minutes of 22 kamikazes. The historians widely consider this the greatest attack on a single ship in the history of naval warfare to have survived. And it will take every bit of effort of every person behind a gun, every sailor behind a fire hose, and every effort to keep the ship afloat and keep the kamikazes off her. So listen to this story. Let me get this started again. Hopefully this gets...
April 16, 1945, the destroyer USS Laffey, accompanied by support ships LCS-51 and 116, is patrolling waters 50 miles north of Okinawa. The ship is on radar picket duty, a new defensive tactic that positions a ring of destroyers around the main invasion force to create an early warning system against incoming aircraft. Laffey is manning station number 1, the closest to Japan. The last 4 destroyers to patrol this area were slammed by kamikazes. Ari Futridis is a 19-year-old quartermaster on Laffey.
We knew that being the first in the line of defense was dangerous, but we didn't realize to what extent.
At 7:44 a.m., radar picks up a solitary Val dive bomber 6 miles out, approaching off the port bow. Laffey's 5-inch guns quickly open fire. At 3 miles, the Val jettisons its bomb and turns away.
Probably came in just to look over the situation, and then took off.
Then, at 8:29 a.m., a swarm of 50 Japanese planes appears on the horizon. The attackers circle ominously, like vultures. The USS Laffey is about to face the most unrelenting kamikaze attack in history. Al Doris watches the terrifying procession from his 40mm gun mount.
Well, there was just about every place you looked. You could see a Japanese plane.
Suddenly, 4 Vals break formation and bear down on Laffey.
They were coming level on the water. Somebody on our gun said, "Oh, here they come. They're coming now."
2 head for the starboard bow. Captain Julius Beckton orders Laffey to come about hard left 30 degrees to bring all his guns broadside to the attackers. Laffey unleashes an anti-aircraft barrage. First, the main battery, 5-inch radar-directed guns.
And then they get in a little closer than the 40. best we could.
Laffey splashes the first two attackers, but the other two valves wheel around to come in from the stern. One valve sheds pieces of fuselage until its fixed landing gear catches the water. Tracers converge on the second valve. Laffey is barely spared a moment's respite before a Judy screams in from 90 degrees to starboard. Judys are a fast dive bomber, top speed 340 miles per hour. But this one's heading in at a poor attack angle. All of Laffey's guns can train their fire on the kamikaze. Immediately, another Judy barrels in on the opposite side. The destroyer's top speed is 35 knots, and it can turn sharply. Captain Becton orders 30 degrees hard right rudder.
This diving Judy was also strafing with its guns, trying to take out personnel on the command bridge. And so we had briefly a two-way gunnery duel between an oncoming kamikaze and the defending gunners.
The Judy is no match for Laffey's main battery. The aircraft disintegrates. But its bomb detonates the water, spewing killing shrapnel over exposed areas of the ship. Planes are coming in from every angle, using specialized tactics developed over months of experience. USS Laffey has taken repeated kamikaze hits. And at least 30 Japanese planes are still waiting to pounce. Now, not a moment too soon. Marine Corps F-4U Corsairs scream in.
We looked up and saw them. Well, that took a lot off of us because they kept them busy from then on.
The F-4U Corsair was one of the most advanced naval fighters of the Pacific War. Its distinctive bent wing derived from the clearance needed from its huge 13-foot propeller. The shape also reduced aerodynamic drag.
The Corsair had a clear advantage over any Japanese aircraft. High speed, tough, very maneuverable, take a lot of punishment.
Time and again, the Corsair pilots risked their own lives, chasing the kamikazes down through Laffey's unceasing anti-aircraft fire. One is hot on the tail of a Ki-43 Oscar.
This Japanese plane was coming in and the Corsair come up underneath us. Tried to raise him up to get him away from the ship.
The Oscar shears off the port yardarm. The Corsair hits the ship's radar antenna and careens away, badly damaged. The courageous American pilot manages to bail out. Suddenly, a bow looms menacingly towards the bridge. R.A. Futrini's battle station.
It was very vivid in my mind. There was a huge bomb under his belly. And as he approached, the bomb got bigger and bigger and bigger. And I really felt at that point that that was going to be a statistic.
But at the last second, gun mount 52 traverses from port to starboard.
He hit the plane directly on the nose and it disintegrated. That I remember very vividly.
Finally, the 22nd and last attacker, a Judy, streaks in. The Corsair blasts the kamikaze before it could strike the ship. Corsair's 2,000 horsepower engines filled the sky. After 80 minutes of non-stop combat, 6 kamikaze strikes, and 4 bomb hits, incredibly, Laffey is still afloat. Of a crew of 355, 32 men have died and 71 more are wounded. But the destroyer will survive to fight another day. April 16th.
This was the sketch that was made after the fight. And when we celebrated the 80th anniversary, the staff down at Patriots Point put this together to help tell the story. The next 20 minutes or so, I want to take you from the distance of that video to the deck of the ship. Before the fight, Becton got his crew together and said this. Sensing this was the Sunday before, and of course this Sunday a lot more people showed up for church than did normal Sundays. But Becton said, "You've done this before at D-Day at the Philippines. You have tangled with this kind before, and you come out on top. They will regret the day they chose to tackle with the Laffey. We will outmaneuver them, outshoot them. You are ready." The Japanese leader that morning, and this is what was known as the third Kukusui, massive suicide attack, he pledged that this was the day that we would remember where U.S. ships would litter the floor of the ocean. That night, what the Japanese would do is they keep showing up and spinning everybody up on general quarters to keep everybody awake all night. And there was the first general quarters at this time. It sounded at 4:52 a.m. and a young seaman, first class John W. Edmonds, who was 16 years old, ran to his station in his undershorts with his pants in hand. Fireman first class Jim Spriggs, who signed my dad's book, recalled seeing a bunch of sharks in the water when he was running to his battle station. Little did he realize that would actually be the safest place to be in a few minutes. Becton used Laffey's speed and maneuverability, as you saw in his skill to turn the ship in ways that allowed the guns to be the most effective. Before the fight, he told his gunnery officer, Paul Smith, to not wait on any commands from the bridge, but engage at the earliest possible moment. What's interesting about kamikazes 1, 2, and 3, and 4, many of them were engaged far out, just by the 5-inch guns. Those radar-directed guns would hit a plane 5 miles out and take it out before the 40s or the 20s ever became in range. What's even more remarkable, when you think and you look at all of these attacks of any particular kamikaze attack, nowhere did a ship knock down the first 2 or the first 3 or the first 4 or the first 5 or the first 6. The first 8 kamikazes these crews denied. There was that one that had the bomb blow off next to the ship, and that did wound some guys in the 40 guns. But they were remarkable. Each time, each attack, the roar would go up among the crew, but they would immediately get back to work as the next planes were coming in, and the next planes were coming in. Youngquist was. This is the plane that had the bomb that blew right next to what you saw in the film. It was 50 yards away. The plane exploded, hurling a bunch of fuel and plane parts over the aft portion of Laffey, slamming into the ocean and exploding the bomb it carried, wounding several Laffey sailors and damaging Laffey's surface radar, partially blinding the ship. Lieutenant Youngquist immediately took care of his sailors. One 20-millimeter gunner was wounded, hanging in the straps. He held him to the 20-millimeter gun. He had shrapnel protruding from his back. He administered morphine. Had to take him to the wardroom and gave him care for the sailor there, and then he took his place on the 20-millimeter gun. Another one of his sailors lost an eye to shrapnel from that attack. The next 7 and 8 planes were taken out by the 5-3 mount. This was an interesting moment. A guy named Delusky was the gun captain on 5-3. That's the rear one, where, of course, at one point the entire rear end of the ship is knocked out of action. There's this moment where his gun jams, the big 5-inch gun. He pops out of the turret, grabs a hammer, and goes to hit the gun. At that very moment, a glancing blow of a kamikaze takes off the top of exactly where he was sitting, the little protected scoop that protrudes out of the top of the gun mount, and a bunch of flaming fuel poured in, wounding a couple of his sailors. Kamikaze 9, it was coming in thick and fast. It was Judy on the lower port side. What was interesting, you only had about 60 seconds from engagement to you would see them, but by the time you could, given their speed of movement and however many rounds you could put down range towards them, it was literally seconds to a minute. And within that period of time, half a minute, 430 rounds were fired from a 44 mount. This plane, number 9, hit Mount 23. Lieutenant Fern Hutchins ran to the shells, tossing them over decks as the fires were burning in their hands. The flame and gas poured into the decks below. Seaman Jim Matthews is blown into the water, almost chopped up by the propeller on a turn. Matthews drifted in the waters, and then Metalsmith First Class was also literally on fire and blown over water, was picked up by the LCT locally there. Kamikazes 10 and 11. Delusky's turret could not turn fast enough to engage Kamikaze 10, leaving Kelly's 20 millimeter gunners to defeat it alone. And these 3 20 millimeter gunners were on the very back end of where all those flames are. And they were trying to take out this last, this plane coming into the stern. They were unsuccessful in doing so. The Kamikaze hit the rear, and it took all of the 20 millimeter gunners out, killing them, cutting them literally in half and leaving them hanging in their own straps. Kamikaze number 11, by this time, Delusky is number 53 turned around. They're coming in to try to take this next kamikaze that's coming in, but it's hard to see, as you can imagine, with all the flames and the fire, as they're trying to continue to fire through all of this chaos. And kamikaze 11 actually hits directly into Mount 53. It blows Delusky out of the back doorway, knocking him out, killing 6 within Mount 53. Coxswain Chester Flint was pinned to the bulkhead by the engine of a plane that slammed into his chest, calling to his gun captain and his best friend, Delusky, but he died a moment later. Seaman First Class Remsen saved his life by rolling him into extinguish the fire. That was another sailor, Johnson, who was on fire. His zipper and his apparel melted to his skin. Boatswain's mate Calvin Wesley Clower went to the wardroom. He was burned and nicked by shrapnel, but when he saw how bad there were so many sailors back there, he decided he could handle the pain, and he went back to the fight. Kamikaze 12. It was in a steep glide from the stern. It turned toward the ship. Fred Gemmel was on the 20 millimeter, 120 rounds fired at the plane to no avail. The pilot dropped a bomb over the stern and evaded and flew to the starboard. What was interesting, I mean, they would combine bombers, divers with kamikazes. So the Laffey was hit by 6 kamikazes and 4 bomb hits. This one stretches as if the stern could take any more damage. It takes a 7-foot hole through the back. It blows through several adjoining compartments and also has some secondary explosions from munitions. The bomb destroys a bunch of area in the back and then locks the rudder in one direction. So all the Laffey can do now is steer in a circle. Lieutenant Ted Runk, who was one of my grandfather's best friends. He worked his way through the debris and bodies, stopping to toss overboard an unexploded 500-pound bomb. He connects with a seaman, Andrew Martinez, and they share a wet handkerchief to breathe below deck amid the fire and noxious smoke to try to see if they can't manually steer the Laffey amidst all of the fire. He was awarded the Navy Cross for heroism. They found the hydraulic lines were cut and could not free the rudders. What Beckton would then do was slow the vessel to allow the fire people to control the fire, but when a next plane came in, he would speed up to tighten the turn and help save the ship. At one point, they couldn't communicate anymore because of the damage that was done, and the crews knew so much, they worked so well together, that the guys in the machine room and the engine room couldn't see anything, but they could hear. When they heard the 5 inches by themselves, they knew the planes were far away. When they heard the 40s, they knew they were getting a lot closer. When they heard the 20s, they were bracing for impact. And as those rounds ramped up, so did the speed. They knew to speed up the ship when needed. A couple of other points to share. Ensign Robert Thompson, who was a navigator, obviously not needed to do his job at the time. He leaves his position as a navigator to push down and to go below decks to start fighting the fires. He's killed by, there's 2 successive kamikaze hits that weren't in that video, but he's killed by one of those and awarded the Navy Cross posthumously. Seaman Wade and Logan, they're below decks fighting fires in the aft when another plane hits and it blocks them in. They can't get out from where they are. The fumes are going up so bad, the heat is so bad that the paint is boiling and bubbling off the steel. They start banging on the bulkhead. The engine room hears them. They drill a hole through it and put a pipe in there, start pumping air so to keep these guys alive. They start banging on the decks. This is in the middle of a fight. And they're heard up there, and the crew gets together and they get a way to cut the deck. And they literally cut these 2 guys below the deck and yank them out, save their lives. Doc Darnell. Incredible stories. Doc Darnell, normally you wouldn't have a doctor on a ship like this, but they were fortunate to have Doc Darnell present. If you can imagine this small ship, I mean, the wardroom in there might hold about 10 people comfortably. But he's got 71 wounded and 32 that are coming in to see him nonstop. In the midst of that fight, a bomb hits outside and it crashes into the bulkhead, taking 4 fingers off his right hand. Doesn't miss a beat, wraps his hand, continues to take care of his sailors. Seaman Powell and his friend Torpedoman Brown are fighting fires. Go back aft. Brown says, "Hey, I forgot my binoculars." Powell says, "Hey, don't worry about it. Forget about it." And he said, "No, I'm okay. I'm going to go back and get my binoculars." As soon as he turns around and goes back, he's killed by a kamikaze. Story after story of unbelievable heroism and risks taken by each other to preserve and take care of each other. And the stories of the gunners who would not leave their guns, the 20s on the back when the kamikazes come in. There's 2 guys that were on a 20, trying to take out an incoming bomb, literally trying to shoot it out of the sky. The bomb lands on their position and killing them both instantly. It gets to the point where everybody, even the pilots, there's several really good stories out there of the pilots that were there who looked down at the ship and said, "She's a goner. There ain't no way she survives this." They've seen what ships look like when they get hit by kamikazes. Carl Riemann, who's this incredible pilot, who's head of a flight that did a lot to help the Laffey that day, said that could not believe that the ship had survived. And at one point, Frank Manson leans over to, and this is after. This is late in the fight. Kamikaze 17, 18, and 19. The gun crews take all of those planes out within a 5-minute period. Frank Manson, who's an amazing, incredible officer and leader, leans over to Beckton and just says, "It ain't looking too good, right?" He goes back. He goes, "Hey, I think, what do you think? We need a abandoned ship?" And Beckton, who was always a very, very cool cucumber. I mean, he was so even keeled. I do a leadership lesson with the National Guard every year, twice a year actually, on the Laffey, and we talk about Becton and his leadership abilities. But he responds, "Hell no, Frank. We still have guns that can shoot. I will never abandon ship so long as the gun will fire. The Japanese will have to finish this job. We will not give them the satisfaction." Under Second Filatico, they're in a 20 millimeter position. These are the guys that fought to the very last minute as a 500-pound bomb landed in their position, killing them all instantly. At every moment in this of 80 minutes, from the gunners taking out the planes coming in, from the Corsairs that were supporting as well. And what part of you didn't see at the beginning of this, they had that Corsair group was there that morning, but the Japanese, suckered them away. So they had a small group of planes come in and had the Corsairs left their combat air patrol role to protect the Laffey. So the first, 60 minutes of the fight, they're gone, chasing these other Japanese, and they did that intentionally so that they move in, and all they got to worry about is the Laffey and to focus on her. So 80 minutes, 22 kamikazes, 6 hits, 4 bombs. My grandfather does say he swears he got one more plane than they give him credit for, but 71 wounded. The legacy of valor, the times that I've had to be aboard that ship and to know some of the Laffey World War II crew, I'll never forget. The Laffey did not survive by chance. She was often called the lucky ship, but my grandfather said they made their own luck. She survived because of her crew refused to surrender, because they chose each other over fear, and because they would never quit. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions. There's so much about this ship and her continued service, and I'm very grateful to have the privilege of sharing with you some of their story. Yes, sir. Yes. Yes, I have it. I have it somewhere. It's a massive list. I mean, it is for her ship and of her size. She's awarded 2 Presidential Unit citations. I do have that somewhere. I don't have it in front of me right now, but there was several Navy Crosses, numerous Silver Stars. My grandfather was awarded the Silver Star for his role in particular. That one last shot where you see that round hitting the center. It's a little different what actually occurred in the record than what's pictured there. It wasn't quite a gunsling. The rounds were actually firing, and they were short. They were running short, and he cranked him up 50 yards, sitting in the gun director, which sent that last round in and disintegrated that last plane, which was headed right for the bridge, and certainly right for Becton. But it is a remarkable number of Navy Crosses, both posthumously and to Ted Ronk and others for their courage, but numerous Silver Stars, Bronze Stars for valor. It's a lot on that in the record. There were some that were awarded immediately that day, and some later as they did, further evaluated events. But yes, sir. Yes.
Where was she repaired after this? And then did she continue on?
She did, yeah. Incredible. So, there she's sits there for a while. They've got some combat air patrol there to protect her. They're pumping water off. She eventually goes to this place called USS, which is a area, a little atoll. They would repair ships, and actually my grandfather ran into his brother there at Thanksgiving one day. He was also in the Navy at the time. But then once she got repaired enough, she made her own steam back. And there's this great story. She goes to the next stop after Hawaii is Seattle. And she is open up for people to come visit. And she's still all torn apart. And if you go down to see the Laffey today, you'll see little markers of where sailors were killed. Those same design markers were there at the Seattle visit when over 70,000 people came to see the ship. One interesting story that day, a young sailor of the Laffey, a Laffey sailor, had a pack of Japanese cigarettes that he had gotten off a dead kamikaze pilot on April 16, 1945. He had that pack, and he thought it just might be a way for him to get a date and go out. So these folks are coming through the ship, and he says, "Hey, I got some real Japanese cigarettes. Give you one, go on a date." And she says, "Fine, I'll take that. Thank you very much," and moves on. And he doesn't get his date, unfortunately. But the better part of the story is her family later, it's all written out, reaches out to Patriots Point and offers to provide the cigarettes. And so they're now part of the exhibit. There's a pack of Japanese cigarettes that arrived on April 16th, 45, carried by a kamikaze pilot that have made its way all the way back on the ship today. Yes, sir.
James, good to see you.
Yes, sir. Always good to see you, Law. Appreciate you.
I hope that if people have not been on board the Laffey to see it, they should. So when I was down there, the tightness of like the 5-inch endurance, tight quarters. But my two questions, one was, where were the Corsairs out of? How did it stay on station?
Yeah.
And the second thing is, what was happening with other ships in the immediate area?
Great question. So there were two basic platforms on station that day. There was the F4s, the Corsairs, and then there was the F2s. The F2s were newer, very, very maneuverable. Colonel Reedman had a flight of 4. They shot down 6 planes before they ran out. They basically had 45 seconds worth of ammo, each one of them. So you needed to make it all work. And so after he literally ran out of ammo, there's a great story of him talking about how pissed off he is that he can't shoot any more planes. So he literally starts ramming them as he's trying to push them out of the way, and he's flying until they're about to run out. And he was flown off the Shamrock Bay, was the carrier he was on. The Grim Reapers were the group of Corsairs. I don't know where they were from, but they were a larger contingent of, I think, about 12. And they ran off, I'm sure they were doing good work. So they left the Laffey without combat air patrol for the first 60 minutes. And actually, the first couple of days of her being on station, there were some planes, Japanese planes came out of them, but the combat air patrol would push out and take the planes out before they ever got to them. These would be small flights of 6 or 8 or 12, but when they showed up with 55 in the sky that next morning, the Grim Reapers are gone, pursuing other things. Yes, sir.
I'm just curious, there are other ships, targets for the Japanese.
Yeah.
Why would they put this much emphasis and this much material against forgive me for any destroyer people?
Right.
Destroyer.
It's a great question, right? Because this is not the prime target. Right? You want to hit carriers. You want to hit the invasion fleet, not the extended fleet. But the reality was that so many of these pilots were very inexperienced. They were basically got 5 days of learning how to fly in formation before they were sent out on a mission. They were all committed to this, and several times it was the first one to see it, and they all rolled into it. So I think it was some level of inexperience, but clearly they would it would have been smarter to kind of save their keep their powder dry and wait to get to bigger fish. But they certainly didn't that day. Yeah. Yes, sir.
A couple of questions on Gordon Laffey. What was she doing in Brunfield in the second year of this battle? We have a family connection in the United States. What exactly is happening?
That's good. I don't know on April 16th, but I'm sure it would have been part of the invasion fleet, shore bombardment support. Typically, the Laffey would have several roles. One, it would screen for the larger ships. It would be part of an outer screen for it would also do some shore bombardment as well, probably closer in type stuff. In the Laffey and the Texas and Yorktown had all worked together in several different parts of these different engagements as they got sort of tasked out. But the Texas has an incredible story, and I know they just did some work to help her restoration, but it's really remarkable if you think about the only two surviving U.S. warships that were at D-Day that still exist on the planet today are the Laffey and the Texas. And we're very, very blessed to have this ship here, and they continue to care for her for generations to come. Yeah, so I don't know if anybody's familiar with Denton's shipyard. So Denton's did the work, and I have something if y'all want to. So the ship that would not die almost died in our own port of neglect for a while. So one of the years I was in the General Assembly, there was an emergency. I literally remember walking on her hull and feeling it squish. It was so riddled with rust. And she had sat too long so in 2009 we sent her back and got her whole new hull. It's about $9.7 million. We would have saved a whole lot of money if we just painted it right. We didn't. But you're welcome to come, see this. This is a piece of her World War II hull that came off in '09 when she was getting her hull replaced. But she's getting ready to go back in January. Right now, I can't tell you how many great things that are happening at Patriots Point, but we generate enough money now in perpetuity care for these ships, particularly the Laffey. She needs about a couple million every, 10 to 15 years. I'm going to try to extend that out to hopefully 20 years. What we do to care for the hull in the intervening years. But she'll go back, get all the barnacles taken off, a new coat of paint, cleaned up a little bit, and then brought back into some new moorings, and that'll take place in January. And so today, you can't access her today because we're preparing her for dry docks. A bunch of her exhibits are coming off, and she's getting ready to go to Denton's. It's in Charleston, yes, sir. Yeah, it is. It's just upriver. It's a short tug ride, and this will be her second. This is her new mission, right? It's a remarkable story. Her time, she did the longest shore bombardment in Korea. She was in service throughout Vietnam, not so much combat then, but they, given the nature of that fight. And then she was at the Bikini Atoll atomic test. She was one of those ships out there, which is remarkable. She survived that. And then she came back as a reservist ship. She was one of the longest serving ships in the Navy at the time before she was decommissioned and then brought here. A fine gentleman by the name of Crawford Clarkson, who was the first chairman of the Patriots Point Commission, and also happened to be a good friend of my grandfather's, said the reason this isn't, like you go to the USS North Carolina, or the USS Texas, the name is the museum. Ours is the Patriots Point Naval and Maritime Museum because it's not about one ship. It's about the Yorktown. It's about the Laffey. And at the very beginning, when they designed this whole idea that we're going to leverage the 498 acres there to generate revenues to care for these ships in perpetuity, which is really a vision that the General Assembly had at the time to say we're going to leverage this resource to care for these ships in perpetuity, and that's where it is now, and we're probably in the best shape we've ever been in doing that right now.
So,
yes, sir. Go ahead.
What's the best book out available about the Laffey?
Look, there are two great ones. I commend both of them to you. This one tells you a little bit more from the sailor's perspective, Hell from the Heavens. The audiobook of this is amazing. And you'll love it. You get from the perspective of the sailors and their letters. And this one was the skipper back that wrote this book, and he tells his story, that. Yes, sir.
I'm just wondering if you're planning on trying to place the submarine.
The Commodore. I tell you, I hate that that's gone. I wish I was on the commission at the time that came up because that was a real loss. And, I don't know when the decisions were made. I do think we should be looking at another ship, how we're going to do that. Right now, we're in good shape fiscally, and we're doing a bunch of new hotels are coming, and other things are going to help generate revenue, and then we'll be in a place to really think about what we want to do next. But the Climagore was a loss, definitely.
What happened to Working King?
She bucked up some, I can't remember, I think it was Norfolk, but she went to the breaker. She was cut to pieces, and yeah. No, she's not.
Wasn't there a nuclear powered cargo ship?
There have been like 4 or 5. There was a nuclear powered cargo ship. There was a Coast Guard ship. The Savannah was there. And what happened to those? And why I can see it's a huge. I mean, these things are not inexpensive to keep in shape, and so I could see if they're not getting the visits, that maybe they look at something else. But yes, sir.
Yeah, just you had mentioned it earlier, made reference to it. Was it actually decommissioned, and then when did it actually go on display at Patriots Point?
I believe it was 75 when it was decommissioned, and it was a few years after that in the early 80s when she arrived at Patriots. So we're celebrating our 50th, so January of 76 is when we started Patriots Point, and the Yorktown arrived, and it was early 80s when the Laffey arrived, and we've been grateful to have her. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. The ship, that's a great question. The ship is named after Bartlett Laffey, who was a Medal of Honor recipient. He was a Union soldier in the Civil War and a battery commander. And there have been 2 Laffeys, and we're lobbying for a new Laffey. So there was Laffey 8459 before this Laffey, just like there was another Aaron Ward, just like there was another Yorktown, the Yorktown CV5 that was sunk at Midway. So 724 is the second Laffey. The first Laffey had a huge, valiant battle against a giant of a Japanese cruiser in the middle of Siren Bottom Sound, Guadalcanal battle, where they'd gotten within 20 feet of each other, and 459 has just pounded this cruiser with everything it's got, and it can't even depress its guns to hit the Laffey because they're so close. But when they get far enough apart, that cruiser opens up on the Laffey, and she's sunk within a few minutes. And her wreck was just recently discovered, by folks mapping those historical wrecks. Yes, sir. All the time. I serve on the. I'm grateful to serve on the. It has been great, and I encourage it. So there's a Laffey Association. I encourage you to be involved. We do a couple things. We have a reunion every year. Sadly, the last Laffey World War II, a guy named Robert Johnson, died a year ago. He was a 40 gunner. He was 18 on this day, but he was a 40 gunner. And but now you have multiple years of Laffey veterans, and then folks like myself that are sons or grandsons of Laffey veterans. And then what we do is we sleep on the ship for a week. They do a lot of serious chipping and painting, some cutting, welding. I mean, a lot of real work gets done that week, and it's a great time, and you get to be kind of devoted to the ship. Yes, sir. Yeah. So there were 78 or 82, because some were minesweeper versions of the Sumner class. The O'Brien was one, the Nelson was one. Of course, the Alan M. Sumner was the first one of her class. But all of them, they've all been reefed or were destroyed during the war. So she's the last one. Yes, ma'am.
So typically ships would sink if either they tip over or they start taking in water.
Yeah.
Did it ever take in water during that?
That fight, yes, it took that stern of that ship was at the waterline. It had flooded the rear end of the compartments. They're fortunate to have, they make those airtight compartments so that parts of the ship will stay afloat. But she was within, she was within inches of sinking that day because of all the water that she had taken on. And they were both pumping the water off, using it to fight the fires, so people were fighting the guns, fighting the planes, and then fighting the fires and keeping her alive. But yeah, she nearly sunk.
Who headed up damage control, and was he recognized?
Yes, there were. A lot of them were. Of course, Ted Runk did a big part of that. He was a big leader in that effort, and he received the Navy Cross for his. Oh, and of course, there was another posthumous Navy Cross for a guy who went down. It got to the point where these weren't their jobs. Like really, they weren't. People were taking and stepping into gun emplacements that lost sailors, picking up hoses that weren't designated to be firefighters. But everybody was focused on saving the ship and doing their part. And there were a number who were recognized for their heroism in fighting the fires and saving the ship. Yeah. Yes, sir.
You know, those two Laffey books are still in print. The reason I'm asking was several years ago I visited the museum gift shop down there, and I'm surprised that I didn't see one by Beckton. I would have thought it would be natural to sell that book in the gift store there, but I didn't see it. Do you know if they're still in print?
So that's a great question, and I am all about, we're getting a new store coming up, and I have been on them about Laffey stuff in the store and not having the books, and that's supposed to change. But Beckton's book is not in print, but I'd say that. But you can still get paperbacks. I don't know, like I get them off of Amazon somehow. Maybe they just print them when you order them kind of thing. But I have paperback, so I get them. I've been able to get them that way. The Wukovitz book is definitely continues to be in print. I'll tell you that. So there's a movie coming, and hopefully a TV series about the ship. So the movie rights are owned by the book Hell from the Heavens, written by John Wukovitz, are now owned by a group called the Hollywood Gang. They have currently Mel Gibson is designated to be the director for the film, and he does a pretty good war movie. If you've seen any of his war films, he knows how to make a war movie. He just says he wants 80 minutes. He wants the real world fight. He says Hollywood couldn't make up anything bigger, and so he wants to do a feature-length film of the fight. And then there's a plan to do a kind of a Band of Brothers style 10-episode series of a crew on a ship in both D-Day and the Pacific. And I'm hoping both of those will get done. So.
James,
Thank you.
so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
I know some of you might still have questions.